This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Oh boy. So I don't know how many of us expected this to happen, but Cam Newton is not only not starting for the New England Patriots, but Cam has been cut. This morning, breaking news, Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles will all over this bad boy. Greg, just your initial reaction. Were you shocked? Were you stunned? Were you surprised? Or none of the above?
I would say none of the above. I mean, I thought this was in the realm of possibilities when you talked about possible outcomes. Now, was it the most likely outcome? Probably not when you looked at everything, but I really did think about, and all the chatter that was going on this summer with the training camp, and is there really a competition? And, there's some reporters out there who really don't look very good at this point in time with their assessment of what was going on the field. I always thought that, in my mind, watching the way that it was working, was that I don't think that Bill was really, and part of it has to go with how things have changed in training camps now and how the practices are structured and how you can't do certain things for a while. And I really thought, watching the practices, I thought that basically Bill Belichick was just trying to educate his team through the final preseason game. And it was all about education and getting everybody to a certain level. And certainly Mac Jones was on a fast track, and they were trying to throw as much at him as possible. But I always thought, once they got done, in my opinion, once they got done with the final preseason games, that's when they were going to make decisions. I don't think that the staff had any real discussions about Mac versus Cam until yesterday, quite honestly. And so for us to be out there sort of predicting what was going to happen, I thought was, kind of fruitless, because I didn't think the Patriots knew what they were going to do. And I thought that they would get in a room on Monday and they would talk it out and talk through different scenarios. How do we want to do things? And, at the end of the day, I thought that, and listeners to this podcast definitely know, I think that anybody who has listened to this podcast or read BostonSportsJournal.com knows that I think this was the just result, that I thought that Mac Jones clearly won this job this summer with his upside in the passing offense, what he can do at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he might not be there right now, but give him 2 weeks for the Dolphins, and they'll put in some things that Mac Jones will make some adjustments to at the line that I don't think Cam Newton was ever going to be able to do. And for those reasons and more, I thought that this was just the just result. And I give Bill Belichick credit for making that decision, not waiting. The easy decision, Nick, would have been to, hey, Cam's our starter. Mac, your time is coming. I can't tell you when, but it's coming. But this is the way I need to do things. And I don't think anybody would have had a problem. And I think, Nick, I think that Bill Belichick is putting himself out there with Mac physically, that if something happens to him physically, it's going to be open to be second guessed on whether he should have gone that route, just for that reason. And so I give Belichick credit, but I do think, as we said, anybody who knew anything about football, if they watched all summer, Mac Jones was the quarterback for this team.
What do you make of the timing? They got together yesterday. They likely didn't have many of these in-depth conversations about the quarterback position, Mac versus Cam, until then. But it is kind of interesting. Today was the day, right? Cut down day. Belichick did not waste any time whatsoever. Could have been telling that Cam Newton and Mac were both not on WEEI yesterday. Instead, it was Brian Hoyer who drew the assignment. That might have been an indication as to they might have been thinking about something. But what do you make of the timing? Today being the day, not waiting any longer, saying, nope, this is it. Cam's done. We're cutting him. We're moving on. This is Mac's team.
Yeah, well, a couple things on that. I'm not, and as far as the information I have right now, I don't have a definitive answer on whether Cam was told he was going to be released, or that was a decision that both sides came to.
Right.
Once Cam was told the news that Mac was going to be the starter. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that we don't know. I think that the timing of it leads you to believe that there were coaches meeting. They made a decision. They went to both quarterbacks, and Bill had a meeting with Cam, and for whatever reason decided that it was best to release Cam. And I think that needed to be decided. If they were going to go with Mac, that needed to be communicated like ASAP because of the 53-man roster deadline today at 4 p.m. And so they needed to see, is Cam going to be okay with this? Is Cam going to be okay being the backup? Is that even an option for us? I don't know whether that was an option. Bill might just have said, look, they reached the decision. It's going to be Mac Jones. Cam really doesn't fit with that offense, so let's just move along. It could cause bigger issues down the road. So we're just gonna release Cam right now and go with Brian Hoyer, and maybe they'll look for somebody else to bring in to complete the room. But Nick, one aside, I think it's hilarious that, according to my Twitter feed the past couple days, Bill Belichick's decision here makes him a racist, apparently, because that's all I was getting the past couple days when I suggested that the room that I wanted was, from the get-go, and we even talked about it this summer, was Mac Jones, Gardner Minshew, and Brian Hoyer. And all I heard was how much of a racist I was for suggesting an all-white quarterback room. So I just had to toss that in.
Yeah, I'm not going to jump down that rabbit hole. Let's instead look at, the idea of Cam, handling QB2, as they say now. First of all, I want to give credit to Cam where credit is due. I thought he had been a tremendous teammate, even to Mac Jones, even going back to Sunday. You saw the video where he chased him down and gave him the 5 after the touchdown pass. I thought Cam handled himself as professionally as he could throughout this entire process over the last year plus. But don't get it twisted. Cam is a former MVP. Cam is a very confident guy with a gigantic ego, like almost all professional athletes are. You can go back to the Brandon Marshall podcast that he did, and he said recently, I'm not one of the top 32 quarterbacks. Of course I am. I'm one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. So it's not outrageous to think that Belichick approached Cam and said, we're going with Mac. And Cam said, cut me. Let me go. Let me find another team. I think I'm one of the best 32 quarterbacks in this league. If I couldn't prove it here in New England, let me prove it elsewhere. With all of that,
but don't you think he's a little bit of a fraud though? If he did say that, from all the stuff that he talked about, and even this I think it was after the first preseason game, he talked about how we're going to have to be there together for each other all season long. And then what that only means, they're only going to be there for each other when Cam Newton's a starter, but not when Mac Jones. I mean,
handling yourself professionally doesn't mean that you're always being honest, right? I mean, let's look at how things are run in New England. I think Cam did a lot of what New England wanted Cam to do when it came to talking to the media. And Cam obviously said all the right things at the beginning, but when you're put in that moment, that's when you've got to say, okay, well, yeah, it's great to be a good teammate, but damn it, I still feel like I can start. And if you're Cam, you look back at it and you say, I mean, even Belichick this morning, and maybe it was trying to give a little bit of fluff to Cam on his way out, but even Bill said this morning, well, he was better this time around than last year. He had improved.
Yep.
So if you're Cam and you look at it, you go, okay, I was better than I was last year. I got most of the preseason snaps. I still think I'm a starting quarterback. So I feel like I can go somewhere else and get the job done. Now, with all of that said, the one thing that Cam did not do, according to protocol and guidelines, was, of course, last week. And last week, we talked about this, Greg, was the COVID situation and the quote-unquote misunderstanding going to cost Cam at the end of the day. How much do you think last week played a role into today's decision?
Well, I think it opened the door for Mac. I mean, I don't know about Cam's vaccination status being like, all right, well, we can't afford to keep you around, or, we can't make you QB1 because we don't know if we're going to lose you. I don't think that was the case. I just think it, and I to tell you the truth, Nick, I think that they would have come to this decision no matter what on the quarterback. Even if Cam was there all last week, I still think Mac would have gotten significant snaps, enough to prove his worth. So, I mean, to me, at the end of the day, I know a lot will be made out of it. I don't think it was a big factor in all this.
I think it's a part of the story. I think it's a part of the story because when you're unvaccinated, as we know, the rules are different. You could lose time. And if you have a backup quarterback, if you have a rookie, and especially you've brought this up, Greg, the left knee, if it's the left knee, right? It's the left one?
Yep, left one.
The left knee, if it is an issue, you want to make sure that your backup quarterback has some kind of stability and that you can depend on that guy to be there every single week. And if you slide Cam back to QB2, if he was willing to take that as a job and say, okay, I'm willing to be demoted, I think eventually I'll be able to get out there. If he was willing to be QB2, well, now you have an unvaxxed QB2 and a rookie quarterback starting with a left knee that might be an issue. So in case he goes down, you don't have that dependability. You know, you're looking at Cam and you go, well, what happens in the worst case scenario that Mac has a left knee issue and he's got to miss a couple of weeks? And then we have a COVID situation with Cam and he's got to miss a couple of weeks. Now we got Brian Hoyer coming in and he's got to be the guy for a couple of weeks. I do think, again, I don't think it's the end all be all. I do think it's a part of the conversation and I think it's a part of the equation. Now, as far as Mac goes, I think all of us looking at this, we say, well, he's a better fit offensively. Like, you know, and Greg, I looked at it and at first I said, well, I was surprised. I was surprised that Cam was cut. You could have told me Cam would be QB2. I would have bought it last week. Telling me he'd be cut on cut day, I would have been surprised by that. But the more I think about it, the more I think of, okay, once you make that decision, A, you don't want somebody behind him with the name and the personality and the charisma and the locker room love like Cam Newton would have. You don't want that on your rookie quarterback. You know, you don't want him breathing on his neck, so to speak. Secondly, he's a better fit. And if you're going to make Mac the starting quarterback, doesn't it make more sense to take the square peg that try to fit in the round hole in Cam and say, hey, we're just moving on. We're going to have Mac as the guy. And now we have two quarterbacks in Hoyer and Stidham. Maybe they go out and get somebody else as well, like you said, because of Stidham's injury. But you've got a couple of guys behind Mac that fit that profile better than Cam does.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with this whole thing, Nick, is just look from the get-go, and you and I have been talking about it. We talked about it before the draft. I loved Mac coming out in the draft for the Patriots. Yep. I said that the Mac Jones hype was real. Yep. First day of minicamp, I basically said his time is coming sooner rather than later. First day of training camp, you know, I wrote that column about 3 snapshots with veteran reactions to that. I know a lot is going to be said about this, and I even saw my guy Mike Lombardi talking about, like, well, you can't lie to the room. The room's going to know, you know, who. I don't think there would have been a big whole issue with Cam and Mac. I think that all the players were confident in both players that they could win games. I do think that they think, and if you ask the receivers, they would have the same reaction as the Alabama receivers coming out in the draft when asked about Tua. I'll take Mac Jones every day, because he puts the ball in the right spot, which he did repeatedly the other night again in the final preseason game against the Giants. I don't think there would have been a huge issue in the locker room. You know, look, you know, Belichick deserves credit, but, you know, also not only if Mac gets hurt, he's going to be open to second guessing, because in my opinion, I know the styles don't mesh, but I'm not a big believer in that. I know people around the team aren't a big believer in that. I've never heard that from anybody inside the Patriots talking about how, well, you know, 2 different styles of offense. I've never heard any of that talk. I think that, look, in my opinion, Cam Newton should have been QB number 2. I mean, he should have been. He's better than Brian Hoyer. Can Brian Hoyer get you through a game? Yeah, sort of, kind of. You know, we learned enough in the Chiefs game. I do think that I think they were encouraged by Jarrett Stidham before his injury issue for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe it was just OTAs and stuff like that. But, you know, maybe they can get him on short-term IR and get him back later in the season. Or I don't know what his status is. But I think the Patriots, you know, do leave themselves open a little bit, because I think if Mac Jones does get hurt and you need a quarterback for, say, a month, in my opinion, Cam Newton had the potential to get you through those games better than Brian Hoyer or Jarrett Stidham. Is that going to happen? And remains to be seen.
And of course, again, we've got to remind people, we don't know how this conversation went. We don't know if this was a mutual agreement. We don't know if Belichick felt, well, if we keep Cam here and he's kind of lurking behind Mac, that's not really giving Mac the keys. It's kind of leaving things open. And I'd rather have Hoyer. And yeah, we might take a hit for 2 or 3 weeks if Mac's out for whatever reason, especially with the knee. If that's the case, then we'll deal with it then. We'll run the football. We'll try to play defense as good as we can, because I'd rather rough it through those 2 or 3 weeks than have Cam go out there, win 2 or 3 games, and now you've got a quarterback battle on your hands. And is it Mac? Is it Cam? And you're going through all of it all over again. If you want to start, you start clean with the rookie, and you say, you are no doubt the best quarterback on this roster. You are the guy that we believe in. We're going to ride with you. Last question about this before we move on to Stephon Gilmore for a couple of minutes. As far as joint practices, and you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to dive deeper. I was confused somewhat by Sunday. Cam missed most of last week. He still started with the 1s. Max still went out there with the 2s. There was some question about, hey, is this even a quarterback competition? I was kind of looking at it going, hey, Bill's the guy that knows what's going on here. I could be confused, but we'll see what he, takes from the joint practices versus the preseason. I think this is no doubt an indication that what you see in the preseason, especially nowadays, doesn't matter nearly as much as it meant 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. And that joint practices did mean a hell of a lot when it came to Mac versus Cam.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I think you're right. I think the preseason games have been diminished, especially at the quarterback position. Sort of like we talked about last week about how I was hearing from people on the Patriots, like, don't read too much into it. Vanilla offense, vanilla defense, this and that. I thought it was more telling, Nick, if you asked me what's one thing that sort of tipped this in the scales, or at least gave you an inkling that this was possible, it was that outside of maybe one or two situations, and one might have been at half speed, Mac Jones was given all the 2-minute situations in training camp, like all of them. I mean, even in the preseason games. And I think I saw Cam do it maybe twice, and once was at half speed. And I think that was significant, and talked about the learning curve that Mac Jones was on.
All right, so Gilmore, he's on the PUP. He misses at least 6 weeks. What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
I thought this was going to happen. I think he's still, unless the Patriots are completely lying, and we talked about this. Stephon Gilmore has been declared throughout camp physically unable to do his job. That's what the designation means. I'm sure others will make some shenanigans out of it, saying that it's all the contract and, this is to avoid fines. And it could be. I don't know. But all I can do, I haven't heard anything else other than he has not yet proven that he's healthy, and they'll deal with this later. And I don't mind this scenario. I mean, if this is a contract thing, then good for the Patriots. I'm glad they called Stephon Gilmore's bluff. And because, like I said, I wasn't going to give him a Buffalo nickel unless he got on the field, improved himself. I'm sure they gave him the opportunity if he was even healthy. And I have my doubts about that. If he was healthy, I'm sure they gave him the option. You come out, prove us, we'll do right by you. And maybe Stephon said no. And if this is what he wants to do and the Patriots get a half season out of him, I'm fine with that. Again, I think they need to go out and get more cornerback help.
Yeah.
Shaun Wade is not going to be the answer, not anytime soon. And so if I were them, I would be looking to deal, whether it's Winovich or whatever, N'Keal Harry, whoever, a combination, even high draft picks. I would be looking to go get a cornerback. And then you're in an even better scenario once Stephon Gilmore comes back, who has to come back and prove that he's still healthy, because the last film that people have is him with a torn quad. He has to come back and play well to get paid after the season. And so you go get a cornerback, then you get Stephon Gilmore back in week 8. Now all of a sudden you have 4 really good cornerbacks, and now you're set up even better. So I know everybody talked about how like Gilmore has the leverage. I'm fine with the Patriots' leverage in this situation.
Of course, we see if J.C. Jackson is a legitimate number 1 corner without Stephon Gilmore out there. He's had a really good camp season and preseason, so hopefully he continues down that track. I would think that if they don't add anybody, this might mean Jalen Mills gets a number of snaps on the outside, which I hate. I do not think he is very good on the outside. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. So hopefully they do pull the trigger on a deal, bring somebody else in. Shaun Wade's going to need at least some weeks to get used to things. And, of course, there's always the slot versus the boundary cornerback conversation that we had last week about Wade and that move. So, there's a lot to be answered still. A lot of things happening. I just wish there was more Patriots news today. Not enough is going on. So Cam is cut. Gilmore to the PUP. We'll see if trades happen. We are recording this at 5 noon. So there could be a lot more that happens. Winovich, he might be dealt. Harry might be dealt. Who knows? But until then, everybody enjoy your time just kind of reading through everything, because there's going to be a lot said over the next couple of days for sure about this decision. It's Greg Bedard's Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.